On the 4th of August 2002, the small town of Soham in Cambridgeshire was gripped by a tragedy that would haunt the nation. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, two inseparable 10-year-old best friends, vanished without a trace. What began as an innocent Sunday evening outing soon spiraled into one of the UK's most widely followed murder investigations. The desperate searches for the girls united the community, yet behind the scenes, the very man who positioned himself as a concerned member of the town was hiding a terrible secret. The case gripped the UK, but not only because of its shocking nature, but also due to the deception Huntley used to evade suspicion. His role in the investigation, alongside his partner Maxine Carr, who provided him with a false alibi, exposed deep flaws in the system meant to protect children. The trial and conviction of Huntley led to sweeping changes in background checks for individuals working with children, forever altering child protection laws in the UK. This is the Secret Casebook, and this is the story of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, a story of deception, betrayal, and justice, a case that devastated a nation yet became a turning point for child safety laws in Britain. Ian Huntley was born on January the 31st, 1974 in Grimsby, Lincolnshire, a coastal town in northeast England. He grew up in the neighbouring town of Immingham, raised in a working-class family. His father, Kevin Huntley, worked in a factory, while his mother, Linda Nixon, was a cleaner. Huntley also had a young brother, Wayne, but despite the stability of his home life, his early years were marked by troubling behavioural patterns. Described by classmates as introverted and awkward, Huntley struggled with social interactions and self-esteem. He attended Healing Comprehensive School, where he was often bullied, an experience that seemed to deepen his insecurities. Academically, he was average, showing no particular talent in any subject, but he had an interest in mechanics and electronics, though he never pursued it seriously. After leaving school at the age of 16, Huntley bounced between short-term jobs, from factory work to security positions. However, his troubles with relationships and disturbing behaviour soon became evident. In 1994, at the age of 20, he married Claire Evans, but the relationship quickly turned toxic. Evans later described him as controlling and emotionally abusive, leading to their separation after just a few months. Following the breakdown of his marriage, Huntley's behaviour towards women became increasingly concerning. In 1995 and 2001, police investigated Huntley multiple times for allegations of sexual offences against underage girls. Complaints ranged from inappropriate relationships to allegations of the R word, yet no formal charges were ever brought forward against him, largely due to insufficient evidence or dropped cases. Failures in record-keeping and communication between police forces allowed him to evade scrutiny, a glaring weakness in the system that would later have devastating consequences. In 1999, Huntley met Maxine Carr, a woman several years younger than him. Carr, struggling with her own insecurities and low self-esteem, became infatuated with Huntley, despite his controlling nature. By 2001, the couple had moved to Soham, where Huntley had secured a job as a caretaker at Soham Village College, and Carr found work as a teaching assistant at St Andrew's Primary School, the very school where Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were students. Terrifyingly, despite Huntley's past, he was able to secure a role at the school without any issues. At the time, there was no centralized system for background checks, meaning that previous allegations against him never surfaced. This critical failure in safeguarding procedures would later be a focal point of national outrage. On August the 4th, 2002, the small town of Soham in Cambridgeshire was enjoying a warm summer evening. The day had been like any other for 10-year-old best friends Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, who had spent the afternoon together at Holly's family home. However, by nightfall, their families and the entire nation would be gripped by one of the most tragic and shocking missing person cases in British history. Holly and Jessica were inseparable. Both attended St Andrew's Primary School, where they were known as friendly, outgoing and well-liked students. On the day of their disappearance, the girls were spending time at the Wells family home, enjoying a barbecue with Holly's parents, Kevin and Nicola Wells. At around 5:04 p.m, Nicola took a now infamous photograph of the two girls wearing matching red Manchester United football shirts, smiling happily. This would be the last known image of them alive. At approximately 6:15 p.m, after finishing their meal, the girls asked if they could go out for a walk. Their parents agreed, expecting them to stay within the immediate area. At around 6:30 p.m, Holly and Jessica walked through Soham town centre, stopping at a vending machine near the Ross Piers Sports Centre to buy sweets. This was the last confirmed public sighting. At 6:45 p.m, as they made their way home, the girls walked past the residence of Ian Huntley, the school caretaker at Soham Village College. Huntley was outside his house at 5 College Close, where he reportedly called out to them. What happens next is a horrifying mystery, but it's believed that Huntley lured the girls into his house under false pretenses, possibly suggesting that Maxine Carr, their teaching assistant and someone they trusted, was inside. Once inside, they never came out. By 8 p.m, Holly and Jessica's family began to worry when the girls had not returned home. Their parents initially assumed that they had lost track of time, but as darkness fell, concern turned to fear. By 8:30 p.m, the families had begun searching the local streets, calling out for the girls and checking places they were known to visit. After failing to locate them, the Cambridgeshire police were called at 9:55 p.m. to report them missing. Unsurprisingly, the police response was swift. Within hours, officers were conducting house-to-house inquiries, reviewing CCTV footage, and issuing missing person alerts. Local residents, gripped by fear, joined in the search efforts, and within 24 hours, the story had made national headlines. Ian Huntley immediately inserted himself into the investigation, acting as a concerned community member. He spoke to reporters, helped with searches, and even gave interviews in which he recalled seeing the girls on the night that they disappeared. In one interview, Huntley chillingly said, "They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was. I was still cleaning my dog down. They just stood and chatted for a couple of seconds. They seemed fine, very happy. Then they walked off in the direction of the library." His apparent helpfulness led many, including the police, to believe he had nothing to do with their disappearance. However, behind the scenes, inconsistencies in his story and his erratic behavior began raising suspicion. Over the following days, hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and search teams scoured the surrounding area. The case was now a national emergency, with television networks broadcasting continuous updates. Despite the large-scale search, there were no signs of Holly and Jessica, leading police to fear they had been abducted. It was becoming clear that someone in town knew more than they were letting on. As the hours turned into days with no sign of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, Cambridgeshire police escalated their search efforts. What began as a missing persons case quickly transformed into a suspected child abduction and possible murder investigation. With no ransom demands or sightings, authorities feared the worst. As police conducted door-to-door inquiries, interviewed witnesses, and reviewed available CCTV footage, one name continued to surface: Ian Huntley. His behaviour both before and after the girl's disappearance became a point of concern for detectives. From the outset, Ian Huntley had positioned himself at the heart of the search efforts. He gave multiple media interviews, spoke openly with the journalists, and even engaged with police officers working the case. While many in the community saw him as a helpful member of the search, his eager involvement and constant need to control the narrative stood out to investigators. One of Huntley's most notable interviews was aired by local news, where he described seeing Holly and Jessica on the night that they vanished. He claimed that they approached him while he was outside cleaning his dog and then asked about Maxine Carr, their teaching assistant. Knowing what we know now, this interview is extremely chilling to watch. This is the footage.
How do we know they were here at 6:15? Well, we have an eyewitness. Ian Huntley here is a familiar figure. Evening, Ian. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
Well, I don't know the girls. I was stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good, as she hadn't got the job. And they just said, please tell her that we're very sorry. And off they walked in the direction of the library over there.
Despite his seemingly cooperative demeanour, officers began noticing inconsistencies in his statement, inconsistencies and suspicious behaviour. Huntley's account of events kept shifting. He first claimed to have seen the girls briefly, but later suggested a longer interaction. Some investigators noted that Huntley appeared overly inserted in police updates and frequently asked about forensic searches. Huntley seemed to know specific details about the girls' disappearance that had not yet been released to the public. A forensic psychologist working with the police observed that Huntley was seen aggressively cleaning his house and car, behaviour often associated with covering up a crime. As police scrutinised Huntley, they also turned their attention to Maxine Carr, his partner. Carr had been in Grimsby visiting her mother on the night Holly and Jessica disappeared, but she provided Huntley with an alibi, claiming that they had spent the evening together. Carr told police that she and Huntley were watching television at home on August the 4th, making it impossible for him to have harmed the girls. However, under further questioning, holes in Carr's story emerged. She originally said that they watched a particular television program, but that show had not aired that night. She also appeared nervous and evasive when asked about specific details. Her friends in Grimsby had confirmed that she was also there on August the 4th, meaning that she could not have been with Huntley and Soham. The moment Carr's alibi crumbled, Huntley became the prime suspect. On August the 16th, 2002, 12 days after Holly and Jessica went missing, police decided to bring Huntley in for formal questioning. However, before officers could detain him, Huntley fled his home in Soham. His sudden disappearance confirmed investigators' suspicions. A nationwide manhunt was launched, and within hours, police located him in a village near Grimsby where he had attempted to hide. Huntley was arrested on suspicion of murder. At the same time, police arrested Maxine Carr on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. Following Huntley's arrest, investigators conducted a thorough search of 5 College Close, the home he shared with Carr. Inside, forensic teams uncovered crucial evidence, including fibres from Holly and Jessica's Manchester United shirts, which were found inside Huntley's home in Carr. They also found burnt fragments of the girls' clothing which had been discovered in the bin behind the house. They also noticed that the house had been recently deep cleaned, but forensic experts detected traces of bloods and hair samples linked to the victims. With forensic evidence mounting, police knew that their perpetrator. However, the biggest question remained: where were Holly and Jessica? With Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr in custody, the priority for police was to find Holly and Jessica. Investigators knew from the forensic evidence that Huntley was responsible for their disappearance, but without the girls' bodies, their families were left in agonizing uncertainty. The breakthrough came on August the 17th, 2002, 13 days after the girls had vanished, when 2 gamekeepers made a chilling discovery near Lakenheath in Suffolk, approximately 10 miles from Soham. The gamekeepers, who were inspecting land near RAF Lakenheath, a US Air Force base, noticed a strong odour coming from a densely wooded ditch. As they approached, they found 2 partially burned bodies. The remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, making immediate identification difficult. However, forensic investigators quickly determined that the bodies belonged to 2 young girls. The discovery site showed clear signs of an attempt to conceal evidence. Horrifically, their bodies had been set on fire, likely in an attempt to destroy forensic traces. The girls' Manchester United shirts were found discarded nearby, burned and partially hidden, and the positioning of the bodies suggested that they had been dumped hastily. Although forensic confirmation was still required, police were certain they had found Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. As news broke that 2 bodies had been found, Huntley, already in custody, exhibited no visible emotion. He refused to answer questions, remaining silent and withdrawn. Investigators believed that Huntley had returned in multiple times in the days following the murders, possibly to check whether the bodies had been discovered. His familiarity with the area, combined with his increasingly erratic behaviour before his arrest, only strengthened their case against him. On August the 21st, 2002, forensic teams officially confirmed that the remains belonged to Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Their families were devastated, and a national outpouring of grief followed. Due to the state of decomposition and fire damage, determining the exact cause of death proved difficult. However, forensic pathologists concluded that the girls had likely died from asphyxiation. No definitive evidence of SA was found, though investigators did not rule that out as a possibility. The confirmation of Holly and Jessica's deaths shattered the town of Soham and the entire country. A wave of public mourning followed as thousands of floral tributes were left outside St Andrew's Primary School. Candlelight vigils were held across the UK in memory of the girls, and the Wells and Chapman families released heartbreaking public statements, thanking the nation for its support while demanding justice for their daughters. Prime Minister Tony Blair expressed his condolences, describing the case as every parent's nightmare. Meanwhile, Investigators were preparing to charge Ian Huntley with murder, and the nation wanted answers. With the bodies of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman found, police now built their case against Ian Huntley. Police had gathered overwhelming forensic evidence linking Ian Huntley to the murders. However, Huntley refused to admit guilt, initially maintaining his innocence despite the mounting case against him. What followed was a calculated attempt to manipulate the legal process, delays in the trial, and a shocking confession that attempted to downplay his true responsibility for the crimes. After his arrest on August 17, 2002, Huntley was interviewed multiple times by police. Initially, he denied any involvement, claiming he had merely seen Holly and Jessica near his house before they walked away. However, investigators had already found the fibers from the girls' clothing in his house and car. They had also confirmed that Maxine Carr's alibi was false and uncovered forensic evidence proving Huntley had attempted to clean his house extensively. As a result, Huntley changed his story multiple times, but continued to deny murdering the girls. Facing irrefutable evidence, Huntley eventually confessed, but his version of events was vastly different from what the investigators believed had actually happened. During a police interview, Huntley claimed that Holly and Jessica had come to his house on August 4, 2002, asking about Maxine Carr, and while inside, Holly accidentally fell into the bath at his home, which had water in it. He then claimed that he had panicked when she became unconscious, and in the chaos, Jessica started screaming. Fearing that neighbors would hear, he covered Jessica's mouth to silence her, which he alleged accidentally caused her death. Unsurprisingly, this version of events was widely rejected by investigators, forensic experts, and the public. It was seen as a deliberate attempt to downplay his actions, portraying the deaths as tragic accidents rather than calculated murders. Although Maxine Carr was not present in Soham on the day of the murders, her role in covering for Huntley was heavily scrutinized. Investigators determined that Carr had provided a false alibi for Huntley, claiming she had been with him on the night of August 4th. She had also lied to police multiple times to protect him and attempted to destroy evidence by covering for his actions. However, there was no evidence that Carr had prior knowledge of the murders, and she continued to insist that she had been manipulated and deceived by Huntley. On August 20th, 2002, Ian Huntley was officially charged with 2 counts of murder, while Maxine Carr was charged with perverting the course of justice. The prosecution immediately began preparing a high-profile trial, gathering forensic and circumstantial evidence to prove that Huntley's version of events was a lie. Meanwhile, Huntley's defense team attempted to delay proceedings, with his legal representatives claiming that Huntley had mental health issues that could impact his ability to stand trial. However, following psychiatric evaluations, Huntley was deemed fit to stand trial. And the trial of Ian Huntley began on November 5, 2003 at the Old Bailey in London, capturing the attention of the entire nation. As he sat in the dock, the families of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman watched on, hoping for justice after more than a year of anguish. Huntley, dressed in a dark suit, maintained a composed expression as the prosecution began to lay out the overwhelming evidence against him. He had pleaded not guilty to murder, instead offering a twisted and self-serving version of events, a last-ditch attempt to evade the full weight of justice. The prosecution, led by Richard Latham QC, systematically dismantled Huntley's narrative. They presented forensic findings that tied Holly and Jessica's clothing fibers to Huntley's house and car. They detailed how he meticulously tried to clean his home, attempting to erase any trace of the 2 girls' presence. The most damning evidence came in the form of witness statements and expert analysis that confirmed Huntley's story of accidental deaths was nothing more than a fabrication. He had deliberately lured the girls into his home, knowing they trusted him due to his relationship with Maxine Carr, and from that moment on, their fate was sealed. As the trial progressed, the atmosphere inside the courtroom grew heavier. The parents of Holly and Jessica, forced to relive the horror of their daughter's final moments, listened as the prosecution revealed the painstaking efforts Huntley had made to cover his tracks. His face remained mostly expressionless, though at times he appeared nervous, shifting in his seat as the evidence stacked against him. The jury tasked with deciding his fate watched and listened carefully, knowing that they were about to pass judgment on one of the most monstrous crimes in modern British history. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the trial came to a close, and the jury retired to consider their verdict. When they returned on December the 17th, 2003, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. As the foreman stood to deliver the decision, the room fell silent. The verdict was clear: guilty on both counts of murder. A collective sense of justice rippled through the court as Ian Huntley was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison, with a minimum of 40 years before he could even be considered for parole, ensuring that he would likely die behind bars. Maxine Carr, though not charged with the murders, was found guilty of perverting the course of justice. She had knowingly provided Huntley with a false alibi, helping him evade suspicion in the crucial early days of the investigation. The court sentenced her to 3.5 years in prison, though she would serve just 21 months before being released under a new identity. Her sentencing was met with public outrage, with many believing that she had played a far greater role in enabling Huntley than the courts acknowledged. As Huntley was led away, showing little emotion, the families of Holly and Jessica embraced, knowing that their daughter's killer would never again walk free. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, many holding photographs of the 2 young girls whose lives had been stolen. There was no real sense of victory. No sentence could bring Holly and Jessica back, but there was a resolution, a certainty that justice had been served. The trial had ended, but the impact of the case would echo for generations, shaping child protection laws and serving as a chilling reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a mask of normalcy. In 2004, the UK government launched the Burchard Inquiry, led by Sir Michael Burchard. The inquiry aimed to investigate how Huntley had slipped through the cracks, despite his previous allegations. Key findings from the inquiry revealed significant failures in police record keeping. Huntley had been investigated for multiple allegations of sexual offences, yet these reports were not shared across different police forces. There was also inadequate vetting for school employees. At the time of Huntley's employment at Soham Village College, there was no centralised system to check an individual's full criminal and allegation history. As a result of the Burchard Inquiry, the UK government introduced the Disclosure and Barring Service, or known as the DBS checks. These replaced the old Criminal Record Bureau checks, known as CRB checks, and required more stringent background checks for anyone working with children or vulnerable adults. The creation of a national police database allowed police forces across the UK to share information about individuals with a history of allegations, preventing them from moving between regions undetected. These changes were directly linked to the Soham case and remain one of its most significant legacies. Today, Ian Huntley remains incarcerated at HMP Frankland, a high-security prison in County Durham. In 2005, he reportedly attempted to take his own life in prison, but he survived. He has since been attacked multiple times by other inmates. Huntley will be eligible for parole in 2042, when he will be 68 years old, but it is highly unlikely that he will ever be released again. Shockingly, Maxine Carr was released from prison in 2004 after serving just 21 months of a 3.5-year sentence. She was given a new identity to protect her from public anger and retribution. Reports suggest she has since started a new life, and her whereabouts remain unknown. The decision to grant her anonymity sparked controversy, with many arguing that she played a significant role in helping Huntley evade suspicion. The tragic murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman left a nation in shock, but their story brought about critical changes that have helped protect children across the UK. Though justice was served, the pain of their loss remains as a reminder of the dangers that can lurk in even the safest communities. What do you think about the case and the lessons learned from it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this episode insightful, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another story from the Silent Casebook.